All right. Let's dive into flap steak. I bet you probably already know flank steak and skirt steak,
Oh,
right?
for sure.
But flap steak
Hmm.
is like this hidden gem. It deserves way more attention. And we're gonna get into like what makes it so special. We're gonna talk about like where it comes from and how to cook it perfectly.
Yeah.
Even some cool ideas for leftovers.
Yeah.
So get ready
I'm excited.
to really expand your steak horizons here.
You know, flat steak is sometimes called sirloin tip or bavette,
Mm-hmm.
but what we're really talking about is a cut from the bottom sirloin, right next to the belly of the cow.
Oh, the belly. Okay, now we're talking. I mean, anything from the belly has got to be packed with flavor, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's that location on the cow that gives flap steak its rich, beefy character.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating, the science behind it.
Yeah.
Flap steak has these long muzzle fibers, good amount of marbling, you know, the beautiful intramuscular fat.
Oh, yeah.
And that translates to a cut that's both tender and juicy, if you cook it right, of course.
Tender and juicy. I'm sold. But, okay, there are a lot of cuts of beef out there, right?
Lots of them.
Why should our listener choose flap steak over some of those more, well-known options?
Value. Flap steak has got incredible depth of flavor.
Mm-hmm.
It rivals the more expensive cuts, like your flank steak, for example.
Yeah.
But it's often significantly more affordable.
Mm-hmm.
In this economy, who doesn't love a good deal?
Right.
Plus, it's incredibly versatile.
Okay. Versatility. Now, that's what I like to hear.
Yeah.
I'm always looking for those ingredients that can be used in a bunch of different ways.
Exactly.
So, what are some of the best ways to cook flap steak?
Grilling is a classic approach, of course.
Of course. Classic.
But it's equally fantastic pan-seared,
Yeah.
broiled,
Mm-hmm.
or even used in stir-fries and tacos.
Now you're speaking my language. Grilling, perfect for summer. But those other options, that's great for like a quick weeknight meal, right?
Definitely.
Before we get into the specifics of cooking, though, I've heard that flap steak is like really well suited for marinating.
Oh, it is.
What's the science behind that?
Flank steak is like a sponge for marinades thanks to those long muscle fibers we were talking about.
Ah.
It absorbs flavors beautifully.
Hmm.
So you can go classic with like a soy sauce and honey marinade for Asian-inspired flair.
Okay.
Or try something like rosemary, garlic, and balsamic vinegar.
Yeah.
For a more Mediterranean profile.
I love experimenting with marinades,
Yeah.
but sometimes I get a little hesitant to try something too unusual.
Right.
Is there like a marinade that you would recommend that might surprise me,
Yeah.
but, that wouldn't be too out there?
If you're looking for something a bit different but still approachable,
Yeah.
I highly recommend a coffee-based marinade.
Coffee
Yeah, coffee.
for steak. Okay.
Yeah, the bitterness of the coffee.
Interesting.
Might sound unexpected, but it adds this wonderful complexity to the steak. And it really complements that rich beef flavor beautifully.
All right, coffee and steak. You've piqued my interest.
Definitely give it a try.
So let's get to the cooking. Walk me through grilling flap steak like a pro.
All right. When it comes to grilling, high heat is key. We're talking 450 to 500 degrees Fahrenheit.
Ooh.
The goal is to sear the outside quickly,
Yeah.
to lock in those juices
Makes sense.
and create that delicious crust.
Right.
Right? Thanks to something called the Maillard reaction.
Okay, high heat. All right, what about cooking time?
Yeah.
I'm always a little nervous about overcooking steak. How do I know when it's done?
For flap steak, aim for medium rare.
Okay.
That translates to about 4 to 6 minutes per side, depending on the thickness of the steak. And here's a tip. Invest in a good meat thermometer.
Okay.
You want to pull the steak off the grill
Yeah,
when the internal temperature reaches 130 degrees Fahrenheit.
medium rare and a meat thermometer. Got it.
Yeah.
So we've got our perfectly grilled flap steak. Is there anything else we need to know before we dig in?
Absolutely. Slicing is just as important as cooking when it comes to flap steak. You want to make sure you slice against the grain.
I've heard that before, but why does slicing against the grain make such a difference?
Remember those long muscle fibers we talked about?
Right.
Well, slicing against the grain
Yeah.
shortens those fibers,
Oh, okay.
making the steak easier to chew and much more tender.
So it's not just a fancy chef trick.
No.
There's like actual science behind it.
There's a reason for it.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, this is all making me hungry. But before we move on to part 2 of our flap steak deep dive,
Yeah.
are there any other like crucial tips for grilling flap steak?
One crucial tip that's often overlooked is to let the steak rest
Oh, yeah.
for a few minutes after you take it off the grill.
Okay.
Give it about 5 to 10 minutes.
Right.
This allows the juices to redistribute throughout the steak,
Ah.
resulting in a more tender and flavorful experience.
Resting the meat. Got it. See, I always want to dig in right away, but
Yeah.
I get it now why that resting period is so important.
That makes a big difference.
Okay, that covers the grilling basics. In part 2, let's dive into some alternative cooking methods and explore how to turn that leftover flap steak into something even more delicious. Okay, we're back and ready to explore some more ways to cook this amazing cut of meat.
Yes.
We covered grilling, but I know not everyone has a grill, right? Even if you do, maybe you don't want to fire it up every time you're craving a steak.
Yeah.
So let's talk about those alternative cooking methods that you mentioned.
Okay.
Pan searing and broiling.
Yeah.
I gotta admit, I've always been a little intimidated by broiling.
Yeah.
But I'm always up for a challenge, so...
I understand the hesitation with broiling, but trust me, it's easier than you might think. And flap steak is perfect for it.
Okay.
But first, let's talk about pan searing.
Okay.
It's a fantastic technique for cooking flap steak, especially if you're looking for a quick and flavorful weeknight meal.
So, walk me through it. What are the keys to pan searing flap steak like a pro?
The secret to a great pan-seared steak is a heavy-bottomed pan
Okay.
and high heat.
High heat?
You want to get that pan screaming hot
Yeah.
before you add the steak.
Okay.
A little bit of oil, just enough to coat the bottom of the pan.
Got it.
That's all you need.
Okay. High heat, hot pan. Got it.
Okay.
Now, what about the steak itself? Any special prep needed?
Before you add the steak to the pan,
Yeah.
make sure it's patted dry with paper towels.
Oh.
Excess moisture will steam the steak instead
Wow.
of searing it. And we
Oh.
want that beautiful caramelized crest.
All right, we want that Maillard reaction magic to happen. Okay. So the pan is hot, the steak is dry. What's next?
Gently lay the steak into the hot pan.
Yep.
And don't touch it.
Yeah.
Let it sear undisturbed for a couple of minutes per side. You should hear a nice sizzle.
Oh, yeah. I love that sizzle. It's like the sound of flavor developing, right?
It is. And you'll start to see that delicious crust forming.
Okay. So we've got a beautifully seared steak. How do we know when it's cooked to perfection?
Remember, medium rare is our goal for flap steak. If you're using a meat thermometer, aim for an internal temperature of 130 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yep.
But you can also use the touch test.
Touch test.
A medium rare steak will feel springy to the touch, like the fleshy part of your palm below your thumb.
Okay, springy like my palm. Got it. So we've mastered pan searing.
Yes.
Now let's tackle broiling. You promised me it's not as scary as it seems.
It's really not. Broiling is all about direct high heat from above, which makes it perfect for cooking thinner cuts of meat like flap steak.
Mm-hmm.
The key is to position your steak about 4 inches from the heat source.
Okay.
Most ovens have a setting for high or low broiling. For flap steak, we want high heat.
High heat. Got it. I'm sensing a theme here.
Yeah.
So I've got my oven preheated. The steak is positioned.
Mm-hmm.
How long do I broil it for?
Keep a close eye on it.
Okay.
Broiling happens quickly. You're looking for a couple of minutes per side,
Yeah.
just to get those beautiful sear marks and achieve that medium rare doneness.
All right. I'm ready to give broiling a try. Now let's talk about marinades again.
Okay.
Earlier you mentioned some like classic flavor profiles like Asian-inspired, soy ginger,
Right.
Mediterranean herbs. But are there any like unconventional marinades that work particularly well with flap steak?
You know, people often underestimate the power of citrus
Uh-huh.
when it comes to marinating beef. A citrus-based marinade can add a bright, refreshing counterpoint to the richness of the meat.
Citrus and beef. Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of citrus marinade would you recommend?
The combination of lime juice,
Okay.
orange zest, and cilantro would be delicious. You could even add a touch of chili powder for a bit of heat.
Mm-hmm.
The acidity in the citrus juice helps to tenderize the steak, while the zest and herbs add layers of flavor complexity.
That sounds incredible. I'm definitely adding that to my list of must-try marinades.
Good.
Now, let's say I've grilled up a beautiful flap steak,
Yeah.
or maybe I've pan-seared it to perfection, but I've got leftovers. What are some creative ways to use leftover flap steak that go beyond just like the usual steak salad or sandwich?
Leftover steak is a gift. You can get really creative with it. One of my favorite ways to use leftover flap steak is in breakfast tacos.
Breakfast tacos, okay.
Just dice up the steak and saute it with some onions and peppers, and you've got a delicious and protein-packed breakfast.
I love that idea. Incorporating steak into breakfast, it's a great way to fuel up for the day.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for something a little lighter,
Yeah.
you can thinly slice the leftover steak and add it to a grain bowl.
Oh, kimchi.
Sure. Farro or even rice would work well. Top it with your favorite veggies and a light vinaigrette, and you've got a healthy and satisfying lunch or dinner.
Those are some fantastic ideas. I love how you're thinking outside the traditional steak leftovers box.
Thank you.
Now, before we wrap up part 2, are there any tools or gadgets that you recommend for cooking flap steak? We talked about a meat thermometer for grilling,
Right.
but is there anything else that would be helpful?
A good pair of tongs is essential for flipping and maneuvering the steak,
Okay.
whether you're grilling, pan-searing, or broiling.
Wow.
And if you're really serious about your steak,
Yeah.
a meat mallet can be helpful for tenderizing the flap steak even further.
Okay. Tongs and a meat mallet noted. Any other pro tips you want to share before we move on?
One thing I always emphasize
Yeah.
is to let the steak rest for a few minutes after cooking,
Oh, right.
regardless of the method you use.
Right.
This allows the juices to redistribute, resulting in a more tender and flavorful steak.
Resting is key.
Yeah.
We covered that with grilling, but it's good to reiterate that it applies to all the cooking
Of
methods.
them, yes.
All right. I'm feeling inspired to get in the kitchen and experiment with flap steak.
Good.
In part 3, let's discuss why this cut is often overlooked
Yeah.
and why now is the perfect time to give it the attention it deserves. Okay, we're back for the final part of our flap steak deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from understanding this unique cut to mastering different cooking methods.
Yeah. It's been fun.
We even explored creative ways to use leftovers.
Lots of possibilities.
It is, and that brings me to my next question.
Go.
Why is flap steak so often overlooked? I mean, it's affordable, it's flavorful, it's versatile.
I think part of it is familiarity.
Mm-hmm.
People tend to stick with what they know. You know those classic cuts,
Yeah.
like ribeye or filet mignon.
Right.
Flap steak might seem a bit more adventurous,
Okay. Yeah.
even though it's just as easy to cook and arguably more flavorful.
Yeah. I get that, and we get comfortable with certain cuts, right?
Sure.
And it can be intimidating to branch out, but
Yeah.
but that's why I love these deep dives.
Right.
They encourage us to explore new culinary horizons.
Yeah.
And to discover hidden gems like flap steak.
Absolutely. And with the rising cost of groceries these days,
Oh yeah, that's true.
flap steak offers an incredible value proposition,
Yeah.
right? You get all that beefy flavor
Yeah.
and tenderness
Mm-hmm.
without breaking the bank. It's a
Yeah.
win-win for your taste buds and your wallet.
Speaking of wins, we've talked about flavor.
Right.
We've talked about affordability.
Yeah.
But let's not forget about the health benefits. Isn't flap steak a leaner cut of meat?
It is, absolutely. Flap steak is naturally lean,
Okay.
which means it's lower in fat and calories compared to some of the other popular cuts.
Mm-hmm.
So you can enjoy a delicious and satisfying meal
Yeah.
without worrying about, overdoing it on the fat content.
Okay, well, you've officially made me a flap steak convert. It's got it all, right?
Yeah.
Flavor, affordability, versatility, health benefits. What more could you ask for?
You really can't ask for much more. It's a testament to the fact that deliciousness doesn't have to come with a hefty price tag.
Yeah.
Sometimes those the most rewarding culinary discoveries are the ones that fly under the radar.
I like that a lot. Okay, before we wrap up this flap steak extravaganza,
Yeah.
let's do a quick recap of the key takeaways for our listener. What are the essential things that they need to remember about cooking flap steak?
The first key to success is to marinate. Flap steak loves to soak up flavor, so give it at least an hour in your favorite marinade. But if you have the time, marinating overnight will take the flavor to a whole new level.
Marinating. Key.
Yeah.
What else should our listeners keep in mind?
Whether you're grilling, pan-searing, or broiling, high heat is your best friend when it comes to cooking flap steak.
Okay.
That high heat will create a delicious crust
Yep.
and seal in those juices,
Makes sense.
giving you a tender and flavorful result.
High heat. Check.
Yes.
And we talked about this earlier, but it's worth repeating.
Yeah,
Don't overcook it.
absolutely. Aim for medium rare.
Okay.
That means an internal temperature of 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Remember, a slightly pink center
Yeah.
is a good thing. It means the steak will be juicy and tender.
Medium rare. Got it. Any other crucial tips?
Last but not least, remember to slice against the grain. This simple step makes a world of difference in terms of tenderness.
Mm-hmm.
By slicing against the grain, you're shortening those muscle fibers, making each bite incredibly melt in your mouth delicious.
Okay, I think we've covered it all. Marinate, high heat, don't overcook, and slice against the grain. Those are the golden rules for flap steak success.
Follow those guidelines and you'll be a flap steak master in no time. You'll be wowing your family and friends with this budget-friendly and incredibly flavorful cut of meat.
This has been such a fun and informative deep dive. I'm feeling inspired to get in the kitchen and experiment with all the different ways to cook and enjoy flap steak.
Me too. And remember, cooking should be a joyful experience. Don't be afraid to experiment. Try new marinades. Discover what works best for you.
Exactly. So to our listener, we challenge you to embrace the world of flap steak. Share your culinary creations with us. We'd love to see what you come up with. Until next time, happy cooking.
And remember, life is too short to eat boring food.